Welcome to Chapter 17, The Modern Art Movement in America. The modern art movement did not have an easy start in the U.S. Modernist European design did not gain a foothold until the 1930s. As this billboard photograph by Walter Evans shows, graphic design in Americas during the 1920s and 1930s was dominated by traditional illustration. When Jan Tschichol's elementary typography was publicized in America, it caused quite a stir. It was highly criticized, but a few American typographers and designers saw the vitality and functionalism of the new ideas. Book designer William Addison Dwiggins was one of the transitional designers. His book, The Power of Print in Men, designed in 1936, used uncommon title page arrangements and ornaments combining the Cubist collage and constructivism with the grace of the traditional ornament. In fact, it was Dwiggins who coined the phrase graphic designer. I want you to tell me, where did we see modern design first show up in America besides in book design? S.A. Jacobs was another important book design. Here he demonstrates a constructivist approach to American book design. And in Merle Armitage's page for Igor Stravinsky, we see hand-lettered sans serif capitals on a striking double title page. Lester Beal came from Kansas and moved to Chicago. Primarily a self-taught artist, he gained experience in the late 20s and 30s as a graphic designer who worked outside of the traditional values. In 1935, he moved to New York. Influenced by Jan Tschichol's new typography and other movements, he began to incorporate them into his work. I want you to tell me, what modern design movements can you identify in his work, and I want you to be specific. He eventually became more involved in the emerging corporate design movement of the 1950s and the 1960s. But he is well known for his posters for the Rural Electrification Administration. Lester Beal's posters reduced pro-electricity messages to elemental signs that were easy to understand for illiterate and semi-illiterate audiences. Russian Alexei Brodovich was invited to become art director of Harper's Bazaar. He had established himself in Paris before coming to America. He was a pivotal designer in terms of bringing modern design principles to American editorial design. Here we see a selection of spreads from Harper's Bazaar. I want you to tell me, why was Alexei Brodovich an important editorial designer? And what were his design ideals? During the 1950s, he designed a visual arts magazine called Portfolio. This magazine was a masterpiece with its visual flow. He used cropping, color, textures, large images, and inserts on various paper types that made the tactile and visual experience of reading this magazine delightful. Here are some covers that he art directed also for Bazaar magazine. Joseph Binder came to America already widely acclaimed in 1934 to lecture and run workshops. He settled in New York. During his time here, his techniques became more refined and his style matured. He created this New York World's Fair poster in 1939. It shows America's embrace of modernism, technology, and global power. The elements symbolized America's coming of age on the eve of World War II. And you can see in this ad for iced coffee traces of Cubism. Overall, what other modern art influences do you see in the posters of Joseph Binder? He is still a force in America design until the 1960s. His military recruiting posters were actually the last examples of the pictorial modernist movement. In this next slide, I'm going to very briefly talk about the WPA, which stands for the Work Progress Administration. And you're going to have to put on your detective hat, and I've got 3 questions for you. What was the WPA? When was it instituted? And what did the WPA do in the graphic arts area. Will Burton was another of the many artists who fled to our shores. He left Germany in 1939. His work combined graphic clarity with a directness that communicated his ideas perfectly. For example, in this design for a cover of Architectural Forum, he illustrates the passage of time in a clear, direct manner. And his design for the first issue of Upjohn Pharmaceuticals journal Scope illustrates his understanding of science. He used color to stand for the new miracle drugs that were being invented. He worked for Upjohn until 1943 and eventually ended up as the art director of Fortune magazine. I want you to tell me what was Will Burton's contribution to graphic design and what 4 principles did he believe visual communication should be based on. A clue to the answer to these questions lies in this picture of a uranium-236 model that Burton created. He devised this model with 92 mini lights on fine steel rods that rotated around a nucleus representing electrons. But his most ambitious presentation was for Upjohn's 1958 cell exhibit, where he created a scale model 24 feet wide that people could actually walk through to observe the inner workings of a human blood cell. Industrialist Walter Paepcke, founder of Container Corporation, was a major figure in the development of American modern design. He pioneered the paperboard and corrugated fiber container, also known as a cardboard box. He saw that design could serve both a pragmatic function and also become a cultural force by his corporation. He was a patron of design. He hired Egbert Jacobson, who was probably the first corporate design director in America. CCA's new visual identity was based on 2 principles: the vision of the designer and a supportive client. Jacobson was a color expert and was put immediately to work. Factories and mills were transformed, and a new trademark was applied to stationery, signage, checks, invoices, and vehicles. Consistency of format was applied. Fine artists like A.M. Cassand were contracted to do many of CCA's ads. I want you to tell me, and there are many specific things in this slide as well as the next coming slides, what did he do that made him a patron of the arts and design? He developed one of the most brilliant institutional campaigns in the history of advertising. This campaign was called Great Ideas of Western Culture, and I want you to tell me what was this campaign. And then, once you figure that out, tell me, why do you think this campaign was so important? During the war, CCA innovated uses for paperboard packaging. Before the war, there was still some doubt as to the strength of cardboard. A Paperboard Goes to War ad campaign prepared the way for this material to be extensively used after the war. Each ad was specific in its depiction of the use of the product. Strong visuals with only a few lines of type. After World War II, CCA sought another campaign using fine art and commissioned a fine artist in each state to visually express their ideas. This fulfilled a Bauhaus ideal, the union of art with life. The artists were allowed creative freedom to express their artistic convictions and their interpretation of their home states. Walter Paepcke and Herbert Baer made another contribution in the area of visual presentation of data in the World Geographic Atlas. This was done in 1953. I want you to tell me, why was this a significant publication and what did the contents include? Ladislav Sutnar was a Czechoslovakian who became a leading supporter and practitioner of functional design. He advocated constructivist ideals and the application of design principles to every aspect of contemporary life. In this title page for Catalog Design Progress, he used bars containing type to balance compositional elements. He structured his information in a logical sequence. He rejected traditional margins as barriers to visual flow and used bleeds extensively, as seen in this next image. He used line, shape, and color to lead the eye as it moved through the design. The format of catalog design process had a coding system of signs, numbers, and words on ovals, and the triangle on the bottom of the title page led readers' eyes forward. Why has his work been referred to as information architecture? And you'll have to dig into the text a little bit more to answer this question. So, in conclusion, many of the designers who came to America from Europe brought design concepts that enriched not only the quality of our design, but also brought with them the idea that design was an important human activity.